Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, welcome to the How to Utilize an MBA to Change Careers and Get Scholarships Too webinar. My name is Lisa Rubini LaForest, and I will be your technical producer and moderator this evening. This webinar will be presented by Donna Bauman and Melissa Prevost. Before we start the presentation, let's take a moment to ensure that everyone is ready and familiar with the webinar control panel. On the right side of your screen, you will see the attendee control panel, and on the left is the webinar viewer window. This viewer window will display the presenter's screen. The control panel can be minimized or expanded by clicking on the horizontal double arrow button in the upper left corner. Minimizing the panel allows for a better view of the presentation. Take a moment to practice. There are a few features of the control panel that attendees should know. First, be familiar with the Raise Your Hand button. This button is located along the left side of the control panel. It allows you to virtually raise your hand if you want to respond to a question being asked by the presenter. Click on this button to raise your hand now. So go find that button and click on it to practice raising your hand. And then once you do so, you can click again to lower your hand. Another important feature of the control panel is the questions pane. To submit a question, type it in the question box. These may be questions related to the presentation or technical questions related to the GoToWebinar system. Tonight, Melissa will be looking at the questions pane for presentation-related questions, and I will be handling any technical questions. You may also be asked by the presenter to type your ideas or responses here as part of an exercise during the webinar. Questions may be submitted at any time. These will be monitored, and we will try to respond quickly if we see something that shouldn't wait until a QA period, such as making a clarification. During the webinar, you may be asked to respond to a polling question or survey. Please take time to participate as your input and ideas are valuable to the group. Be sure to stay attentive and to interact as much as possible during the webinar. The quality of your experience depends on your attention and participation. Try to avoid the distractions of responding to email, checking Facebook, instant messaging, or working on other tasks at your computer. If you need to step away for a moment, do not close the GoToWebinar window, as you would be required to log in again if you wish to rejoin the session. If you experience problems with the audio, one possible solution is to use the conference call number and listen to the presentation using your phone. Click the Use Telephone option in the audio pane of your control panel to view the conference call number. This webinar is being recorded, and the online archive will be available to view on the CAPA website in approximately 2 weeks. Are there any questions before we begin? And now I would like to hand it over to Donna.
Great. And actually, I'm gonna have Melissa, my colleague, sort of kick this off. But the title of this is How to Utilize an MBA to Change Careers and Find Scholarships, and we're really gonna break them up into two parts. But before we get started in that, I'm gonna have Melissa introduce herself, and then I'll introduce myself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Prevost. I've been with Stratus for a little over 3 years now, and I was a Kappa at Illinois, feels like a million years ago, and then got my MBA from Haas. I was an alumni interviewer for Haas for a long time, and part of the reason I became an admissions counselor was as I was doing the interviews, I would often be trying to get a nugget of information. I knew there was something with someone I was interviewing and just couldn't quite get there. And so I always wanted to hop on the other side of the table and kind of coach them through it. So I decided to become a coach and actually do that. So I really love getting to know my clients and help pull out the nuggets of their stories we'll talk about those kind of the nuggets can be pulled out throughout the presentation, but just a little bit about why I became an admissions counselor. Don, I'll head it over to you.
Okay, great. So I am also with Stratus. I've been with Stratus, I think, a little over 3 years also. And I went and did my undergrad at UNC Chapel Hill. I was in Epsilon Gamma chapter. And actually, I was just having a conversation with Lisa before the broadcast started about how I feel like at Kappa, that was really the first, one of the memorable times where it was a community of women who I was so impressed with the leadership and just so impressed with how much these women did, and it inspired me. So I'm really excited to be talking to Kappas and friends of Kappas tonight. Like Melissa, well, my story is a little bit different in that I went to Kellogg for my MBA, and then I went back to UNC Chapel Hill, and I helped the undergraduate business program sort of develop an undergraduate career development program. But then after a few years, I found my way into MBA admissions. So I spent 15 years at Keenan Flagler being the admissions, making recommendations for admissions, interviewing candidates, managing regions, everything that has to do with admissions. So that gives me a very interesting background to now work with my clients and help them. And like Melissa, I would find sometimes, I wish I could say more, but in the position I was on for the admission side, making decisions, that wasn't always easy. And then in the connection of how sometimes things in your past come back in ways that you maybe didn't expect. After my undergraduate at Carolina, I worked in New York City for several ad agencies, and I worked on the national brands for Corningware and Maxwell's Coffee. So I helped position brands and sort of figure out what was unique about them. And now I kind of take that knowledge with me, and now the brand is, my clients, and I know what schools, how they think, and the admissions process. So I really, it's actually it's very rewarding. I really enjoy it very much. So that's a little bit about me. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about Stratus. And, it's funny, Melissa and I were talking, we changed the title of this a little bit. I think when we first positioned it, we called it how to, pivot and then get paid for it too. And in light of all of the horrible things that are going on in the news about some of these undergraduate admissions scandals, I feel like we have to say up front, we have nothing to do with that. What we do in admissions counseling is we have no control over the outcome. We really are just there to kind of like in a way, some people like to work out with a trainer. Some people, can do it on their own. We try to make our clients' time most efficient by helping them clarify their goals. We spend a lot of time helping people understand what are the right programs for them, and scholarship selection and strategizing, if that's important, is a big part of that. We have a team of counselors. All of our counselors have MBAs from top programs. And so we collaborate where no matter what school you're interested in, we have some expertise, someone who's either an alum or did admissions or has some kind of connection. We work with hundreds of candidates every year. All our clients get into all the top programs. If you ever want to Google Stratus, you can find us on GMAT Club, Google, Yelp. You can read what some of our clients have said. We are quoted in, articles about MBA topics. So that's a little bit what we do. We also are unique among other counseling firms in that when people work with us comprehensively, and we work with people in all different ways, hourly, comprehensively, or whatever, but we have people who, if they work with us on 4 schools and they give it their best shot and it just doesn't work, and fortunately that doesn't happen all that often, but if it does, we actually care so much about the outcome that we are set up so that we will work with people again the second year. So it really turns out to be a good value for a person. If you're saying you're committed to go to get an MBA program, if you work with us, and we can help you sometimes over 1 or 2 years to get the desired outcome. So that's a little bit about Stratus. And before we get into the pivot strategies, this might be a good time to see if we can do some of those polls just to learn a little bit more about who's on the call tonight so that we can tailor some of our material to knowing our audience.
Excellent. Let's do our first poll then, which is, where are you located? The poll will pop up on your screen. Click on the selection and then click on submit.
All right, looks like everyone who has submitted, oh, there's a little change. We are mostly east of the Mississippi, about 3/4 east of the Mississippi, and about 1/4 west of the Mississippi.
For our second poll, we want to know what type of MBA program you are considering.
So we know that there's lots of different types of programs out there. It looks like about half of the crew is looking at full-time, with about 1/4 at part-time, and then a balance between executive and online. So that's great. Looking at lots of different programs. We'll make sure we talk about each type as we're going through.
Excellent. Next, when do you expect to start your MBA program?
This just gives us an idea as to where you might be in the process, and so that we can talk through. So it looks like no one is looking to start this year, which is great because we're pretty late in the season. So about a third or about half within the next couple of years, and then a half still trying to decide when they're going to apply. Maybe even if they're going to apply. It's a great to be here and listen for that as well.
The next one asks about the GMAT/GRE.
Just wondering if people have had a chance to take it, thinking about taking it. And
I will throw in, let me throw in while we're waiting on that one. If you're thinking at all about getting an MBA, your life is easier if you sort of tackle the GMAT GRE first, because then once you have the score, or the range of the score, it really also can help you get a better sense of where you might be fitting, or how you're going to slot in, and it certainly also impacts scholarship strategy. So while we do have clients that do GMAT testing while actively applying, if you can avoid that and do the testing first, I think it just makes it easier. So.
Yep, and John, I'm not sure if you can see the results here on the screen, but about 2/3 have asked, no, do I have to? And I think just to address that, it really depends on the type of program, since we have people that are looking at different types of program. For a full-time program, yes, it's a pretty solid requirement for most programs. For part-time, again, most part-time programs will require. Some executive programs will allow you to take what's called an EA, which is an executive assessment. And some will actually allow you to waive. I've had a couple clients that are executive programs that have waived their GMAT or GRE because of the years of experience they have. Online programs, I think you would probably have a mix there. You would probably find some that you might not have to have a GMAT or GRE, but then some of them will. So just to give a little answer on that one, that was the
I think
dominant answer there.
Yeah, no, I think that's good, and I would add on the online. I think that there are sometimes, if the work experience is strong enough, and sometimes in my head I have sort of 7 years as kind of a threshold, where sometimes after 7 years, programs online or executive may waive, but some programs, even executive MBA programs, will require an MBA. So you really just have to look school by school, and that's the kind of thing that you can ask. It's on the website, or it's in the conversation, particularly for executive MBA programs. You often, one of the first things you'll do is actually engage with a counselor at the school, and they will be able to help walk you through all of that.
All right, I think we've got one more.
Our last one is how many years of work experience do you have?
So as we were talking about the different types of programs, just trying to gauge here. So it looks like we've got about 60% less than 3 years, and then the balance more than that. So we'll probably talk about this a little bit throughout, but the kind of middle 80% of people are in the 3 to 8 year range of years. So looks like most
for full time.
For full-time,
For
yes.
full-time.
Yeah. And then it'll go up a little bit for part-time, and then executive is going to be closer to 7 to 10. All right, well, why don't we jump in? So as Donna mentioned in the beginning, we're going to kind of split this into two pieces. One, talking about, what are the strategies that you can and should be thinking about is if you're looking for an MBA to help you pivot careers. And then we're going to talk to you about how you maximize your chances at scholarships while you are making that transition. So if you can go to the next slide, Donna.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So if you want to think about a transition as a three-legged stool, or even a hat trick in hockey language, so there's kind of three main things that you could change. You could change function, you could change industry, or you could change geography. And it's quite difficult to change all three. So you really want to think about what you can leverage from your current role into the future role that you want to pivot into. Donna, can you switch slides? There we go. So you want to think about, how can you leverage your industry or geographical knowledge. So, for example, if you wanted to change from New York to San Francisco, or say New York to London from, go to a new country in the tech industry, which is now obviously very global, you could use an MBA to potentially change locations. You might be moving in a tech product management role in one country to a tech product management role in another country, and really be able to potentially bridge between those two countries. You could look to work as, if in changing industry, you could work as a product manager in tech and potentially look to change into, say, retail and consumer goods, or vice versa. And this might be moving from a product manager of a small ed tech firm, to a product manager of a company like WeWork. So you're doing the same type of function, but into a new type of industry. And also you could change industry. So say you are looking to work within commercial real estate sales, and then you want to work to be a product manager or a business development at WeWork. So, how can you work within an industry? You can change within an industry. And the key thing you want to think through is, what are the transferable skills that you can bring from your prior career, as well as kind of all the experience that you've had throughout your life. Jenny, you want to go to the next slide?
Yep.
So touching on, what are the skills that you want to bring forward? We wanted to touch on the areas of evaluation that an MBA program is going to be looking at as they are evaluating whether or not they believe that this pivot this pivot is the right pivot for you. So as I said, you want to think about your skills that are transferable, and you want to make sure that that comes across in your application. Every admissions committee evaluates applications differently, but most will look at all of these areas and do so holistically. So each of these is a piece of the pie. If you keep in mind, there's way more applicants each year. And so they use this as an evaluation. So you could think about that, on each one of these, an admissions committee is going to give you a 1 through a 5 or an A through an F. And very few candidates are going to get straight A's. But if you have more C's and D's than A's and B's, you're unlikely to be invited for an interview. And Donna will talk a little bit more about how this plays into the scholarship piece as well at the end. But I just wanted to talk through, how can you leverage each one of these pieces that you're going to be evaluated on in highlighting a pivot from a career standpoint. So, from an academics and more the academics than a quantitative readiness, but if you are looking to make a pivot could you point back to some classes or something that you were involved in undergrad that might be able to show early interest in the career that you're talking about or that you're looking to go into? So say you are a teacher and looking to go into ed tech. Well, maybe you took a computer science class in school, or maybe you were involved in a project that was related to technology while you were in school. The other piece with work experience is within the job that you are in now, what skills have you built that you will be able to leverage into the new position? So, for example, if you're a consultant now and you're looking to go potentially in-house or specialize into a specific industry, within consulting, often you're building relationship building skills, you're building team skills, you're building change management skills. How can you leverage those skills into the new position that you're looking for? Across leadership and community involvement, again, similar to academics, even post-undergrad, if there are things that you're involved in. I had a client who was, and we're going to share some other client stories here, but she was a dragon boat racer. And so she did not have a great amount of teamwork in her work, just the nature of her work, but she was really able to highlight how she could be team oriented using her dragon boat experience. It was also kind of a unique thing for her to be memorable. And then recommendations. Can you could talk with your recommenders as you're giving your recommenders guidance on how and where you want your career to go. Then you could highlight specific skills or ask them to highlight specific skills and give your recommenders specific examples to highlight those skills. And in your essays. So this is an opportunity to talk about, through the stories that you tell, why you want to make this transition. And you really want to make sure that you leverage each of these so that why you want to make this transition is clear. And show that A, you have the skills to make the transition, and B, that you know the industry that you're moving to well enough that admissions can feel confident in you making that change. You don't want the admissions team to have to guess, so it's really up to you to show and do the research at that school to show that you can make that move. And I've got an example of a client who did this here. So she had a very different background. She'd worked in healthcare consulting as well as financial sales, both in the Midwest and New York, and she wanted to move into media and entertainment. So she really pivoted on all levels. She was in New York and she really wanted to end up on the West Coast. So in talking with her and really trying to understand where this interest in media and entertainment came from, I learned that she moved to the U.S. when she was young, and she really learned English by watching TV. And through our conversations, she's always doodled in school and always was very interested in art, and always took classes both in college or took a couple classes and had taken some since college. So we really leveraged that piece of her background. Highlighted the skills that she gained from healthcare consulting on a problem solving and results oriented, and financial sales was really, she had a lot of people skills that she worked through, and then leveraged this thread of kind of creativity and art throughout her application. So she is now finishing her first year at UCLA to study media and entertainment, and through the process, actually through the Forte Foundation, got a scholarship as well. Donna, you there?
Yeah. Did you want me to switch the slide or no?
Oh, yes, thank you. Sorry, this one's me as well.
Yeah.
Forgot about that. All right, and another quick example is a client that was in healthcare consulting and wanted to move to energy. And this client really had done a lot of, their first love was energy, and that just didn't work out for them, their first job after undergrad. So, we really went back to a lot of the work that they did in undergrad. She had done a recycling project at her work, and had attended an energy conference, and wanted to stay in Chicago. And there was a large energy industry in Chicago. And so we really leveraged her skills of problem solving and people skills. And she will be graduating actually from Kellogg this summer, or this spring. So really leveraging that, the history of her energy. All right, now I'll hand it over to you, Donna.
Yeah, sure. And so I was going to give you yet another example, and this is a client I worked with who is actually now getting ready to graduate from Fuqua, but pre-MBA, and this was someone who did not have a ton of work experience. She was actually very successful in getting scholarships, and I'll talk about some of the reasons why when we talk about scholarships, but she worked in sort of a customer success sales role prior to her MBA, but it was in biotech. So she had that thread where she had that industry knowledge of healthcare biotech. She wanted to move to product management post MBA. She was someone that was based on the West Coast coming in, and was very open to go back to the West Coast, although for her MBA, she went all the way across the country to Fuqua. I think one thing that's also interesting to point out is it can sometimes be a two-step process, even these pivots. So when she was doing her application, she thought her goal was to immediately after an MBA work in product management in biotech for, big biotech company like a Genentech or something. As it turns out, what she did, the last that we talked, is she got a full-time job offer working for a consulting firm, but their focus is healthcare, and they do a lot of marketing, consulting with clients. So this is where, it may be that some of the clients she works with are these larger biotech companies, and in a few years, she may then still move on to product management. But the flow of this is very logical, whether she had immediately gone on to product management in biotech, or, taking this step. And this is something where no matter what you think you're going to do, once you get to business school and you learn, obviously the whole point of going to business school is to take new classes, be exposed to new ideas. So sometimes those, what actually happens is a little bit different, although in her case, it's really not too different. And again, she was really able to leverage, again, some of the things she had in terms of industry knowledge, and then be able to make that successful pivot and get, this is a good segue, and get some really generous scholarships, which I know made her MBA experience a lot less stressful. So in terms of scholarships, as I alluded to earlier, if that's important to you, and again, for some people it is, and some people it isn't, but if it is, then you really need to build that into your MBA strategy from the beginning, from the get-go. And this is where sometimes working with consultants can be very helpful, because, when you work with clients year in, year out, and you see how different schools are awarding different kinds of candidates, and granted, we can never know on the outside exactly what's going on each school, but I can tell you from the experience I had watching from the school side, there's definitely some ways that schools think about what makes someone an attractive applicant or not. And again, having some guidance and knowing where you might be most compelling as a candidate for scholarship is useful. I want to say, in terms of, awards, the available awards for scholarships really range from, in some cases, a one-time, $5,000 to sometimes 25% scholarships to 50% scholarships, all the way up to full fellowships. And in some cases, there's value in those full rides where they're named scholarships, where there's not just the money, but it's also the access, where you are a dean's fellow or you are in a special named scholarship program where you get access to maybe better, you're on more resume books, you're getting access to high profile alums that are going to, you're going to meet at scholarship dinners and all kinds of things. So, but I wanted to say there's all kinds of money out there, and to address the point that I know most of you are looking at full-time, and I would say there's the most money for full-time. But I am noticing in working with some of my clients, I'm seeing, which I never saw before, I'm seeing some small amounts of, maybe $10,000 scholarships for executive MBA candidates, sometimes for online. So that is nice to see that there is starting to be some scholarship opportunities in part-time executive, where there didn't used to be quite as much. But still, the lion's share of the money is going to be in the full-time MBA market. And in terms of who gets these scholarships, so this is just sort of a little slide, when you think about it, and again, to talk about like a big three, your GPA from your undergrad, your GMAT or your GRE, although I think the GMAT drives this more people, probably 80% of people take the GMAT, and the work experience. And when you think about it, a school is offering scholarships to people who are at the front of the pack in this. So you really have to be in, above the bar, usually on all three measures, sometimes just two key measures, to be in that group that a school is going to say, hey, we want you so much, we're going to bring so much to this community that we really want to strongly encourage you to come with funding. And just to give you some ideas of, what we're talking about, most of the very top MBA programs, top 10, the average GPA is somewhere around 3.6. There are certainly lots of really strong top 50 MBA programs where I would say that GPA average is closer to 3.3, 3.4. So again, that gives you some idea. There's not a whole lot you can do to change your GPA once it's set. Certainly there are some things you can do to the school to show them. For example, if your GPA isn't what you wish, you could take some extra classes at colleges and get good grades in those quant classes, show them that you can do the work. But there's really not a whole lot you can do in terms of positioning yourself for scholarships. So that GPA is what it is. The GMAT, generally speaking, I would say that if your GMAT score is 20 or more points higher than the stated average, that's going to give you a better shot at scholarships. If you find that your GMAT score is not where you wish it was, you might try the GRE, because if your GRE score is higher than the GRE average, then that might also help you. The other piece that maybe sometimes people don't think about, and I want you to sort of think about this so that you might say, what is it that I bring that could be interesting? So schools not just they do look holistically. So they don't just want, high GMAT scores and high GPAs, although those things matter. They're also looking for really interesting work experience. And sometimes people feel like, oh, I'm not a consultant, so I'm not going to be competitive for an MBA program, a top MBA program, or investment banker, or something that maybe people think is more common. But a school, when you're building a class, you don't want everybody to be consultants or investment bankers from New York City. You want to have people with different industry experience. So, if you're doing something rather unusual, instead of thinking, oh, I'm, an outlier and that's bad, really think about, hey, that's actually, you bring something different. Maybe, and especially if you're working in something that is highly desirable in the MBA world. And right now in the MBA world, everybody wants to work in tech, everybody wants to work in fintech, everybody wants to work in private equity, venture capital. These are things that weren't the case when I was applying to business school and going to business school a long time ago. So if you work in private equity and maybe your GMAT is good, but it's not like super above, or your GPA is not super above, but you have this private equity work experience. Guess what? So many of your classmates want to work in private equity, and the school is like, we want to have people in the class who can help classmates. So that might appeal that might be something that appeals to you. So that's, again, something to keep in mind. Think about, if you worked at Google or Amazon, everybody wants to work at Google and Amazon. MBA programs, they hire a lot. Schools love to have people who have West Coast experience because they're all these interesting employers. So if you bring that, that might be something that can help set you apart. So really, whatever you're doing, think about what it is that might be, where you can add value, and then build that into your application. In terms of talking about some specific scholarship resources, first of all, I just want to say, and this is where there's also scholarships for different groups of people. And there has never been a better time for women to get an MBA. There has never been more opportunities, more money. There's also special opportunities for underrepresented minorities, people who are maybe part of LGBTQ communities, people with Hispanic backgrounds, even, so all kinds, military people. So in terms of, thinking, okay, well, if I'm in any of these special groups, and obviously all of you on the call tonight, high likelihood, since this came through CAPA, that most of you are female. So first one that I want to talk about is the Forte Foundation. The Forte Foundation is an organization that is dedicated to really trying to get more women in the MBA pipeline. And they have some really good programs. One of them is called Forte Launch. And that in itself is not a scholarship program, but what that is an opportunity for women to be more prepared in the MBA pipeline. So they have this Forte Launch program. You apply for it. It's a 10-month program. It costs about $550 for you to get in it, but you get application fee waivers from all the Forte schools, and there's like 30 Forte schools. It's quite a lot. So you basically won't be paying for your MBA applications. And if you apply to 4 or 5 schools, you're already going to make the money back there. The launch program gives you sort of step-by-step, special webinar sessions. They give you access to some discounts on test prep, on admissions counseling, opportunities to talk to admissions counselors, and sort of craft together your story, to network with other people in Forte. And then schools are obviously partnering with Forte, and each school, looking at women, will look at some of the top women who have the things that they're most interested in and can offer women a Forte fellowship, which is usually funded by the school, but the Forte connection gives you that access that I was talking about, where you get then some extra resources for, job tips or getting into special internship opportunities or networking events. So it's not just scholarships, but it's also access, which is useful. Consortium is another organization that I have mentioned here. That's something where they award full merit-based tuition fellowships to top candidates who have a proven record of promoting inclusion in their school, jobs, or personal lives, to basically increase the number of the representation of African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Native Americans in MBA programs. And while the lion's share of people who get consortium fellowships are people who are in one of those categories, you don't actually have to be one of those to get the consortium fellowship. You have to have a proven record in your work life of doing something to make that better. So that's something to be aware of. Again, looking at that. Reaching Out MBA is a nonprofit organization, again, that is looking to get more representation for LGBTQ community. So if you, and also just information and, sharing. And I also recommend sometimes to my clients, if you reach out, and no pun intended here, but if you reach out to the Reaching Out group and you connect to people at some of the MBA programs where you have that connection that goes beyond school, I think sometimes you get better information. You can get better, people are more honest, and they're not just representing the school, but they're like, hey, I really want to tell you what I think about this program and what my experience has been. And again, there are some scholarship resources through those organizations. Prospanica is one that is dedicated to helping Hispanic and Latino students in the MBA program. They have some scholarships, not huge ones, but definitely worth looking into. Yellow Ribbon Program has scholarships that would be related to military. I put on Kappa Kappa Gamma because, there's the Rose McGill Foundation scholarship scholarships, and those can be used in part for graduate school. So obviously that's not like, you know, a number one thing for, you know, funding your entire MBA, but look at some of the organizations that you're in, like Kappa Kappa Gamma, and find out what kinds of educational scholarship resources there are, because there are out there. TWEGO is another one, and that is dedicated to increasing minority students in finance careers, and they broaden minority to include, I believe, Asian Americans as well. So they have a little bit of a broader minority or diversity factor, but that's one for people who are interested in MBA careers in finance. So if you don't know about that, you should look into it. The other thing to think about too, and this is where doing some research and maybe a consultant can help you, but there are some MBA programs. For example, Arizona State has sort of a mission to offer generous scholarships to most of their MBA applicants. So there are some, I think Michigan State might be another one. There are some programs where if you get in, they're sort of built that into the application process, that there's some money. There are also, I was Googling and doing some research for this, and I would agree with this list. I mean, there are lots of, you know, every top program has scholarship dollars allocated. And in most cases, it's not that you have to do anything special other than be in that top group, be a really competitive candidate. And that's where, if you're doing self-reflection about where you're above the bar and where you're below the bar, and pick schools where you could be competitive for a scholarship, that's going to help you. And if you want to do something like go work in consulting or go work for Amazon, and they recruit at every MBA program, you know, why would you not want to at least give yourself a chance to put some schools on your selection list where maybe you are in that top group of students and you can be that top student? In Googling some other programs, Rice University, the Jones School of Business, Mendoza, they have some very generous scholarships. So really it's just doing some research, but again, all top programs have some, but really looking at that, because there is money out there. One of the things that makes me happy about my job is when I work with people and they are able to get generous scholarship offers. And I think in the last, I haven't totaled up this year what my clients have gotten, but it's definitely over $1.5 million of scholarship offers that I've seen just working with a, you know, relatively small group of people. So there is definitely money out there, and it's worth it to do some research and build that into your, you know, build time in your MBA research and process to sort of put that on the front burner. I'm going to give you a couple examples. So this is a client we worked with, and scholarships were an important part of her strategy. So she looked beyond top 10 MBA programs where she was above the bar on those key metrics that we talked about. She was looking to transition from a marketing role in a regional bank to investment banking. She actually was named as a Dean's Fellow at Indiana Kelley, and she got some extra support and the access that I was talking about as being a Dean's Fellow. And it's also really important when you're picking schools where you're going to pivot to notice, is this school have some, you know, really good experiential learning and career specific resources so that you can make the switch. So she was very happy with that. Another client that I was going to tell you about, and I don't have a slide on her, but just who was accepted to McCombs, Olin, Full Ride. They're actually for multiple, that's another one. Olin has some really good scholarships available. But she ended up going to Duke, and she's a Forte Fellow, and she was able to basically make a pivot from sort of a restaurant operations background to more of a supply chain background, and she's looking at internships right now with Walmart, InBev, Amazon. So she's well on her way to making her pivot. And I think that Melissa has another example she was going to give before we kind of wrap up and do some get some questions, hopefully.
Yeah, so this is, I'm excited to talk about this one. I actually changed it up recently because it's a recent client who just found out that she was awarded a $100,000 Forte Fellowship. She was in her application process. So she actually spent 7 years to get through undergrad, which was, is different than most. And her career had kind of taken some different paths. And she had done consulting. She had worked at a footwear company and had then done kind of financial analysis. And she was really looking to go into leverage her footwear and really kind of the strategic planning side of what she did in her current role to work within, say, a Nike or an Under Armour. That's really where she wants to be long term. And one thing she did really well through the process was she was a Forte Fellow, and she really used her network within Forte to build strong relationships within each school. So she did a lot of informational interviews, really got to know each of the schools that she was applying to very well. She, in her past, she had done some mentoring with her undergrad for some consulting teams, and then also did that again at her consulting company. And so she was really able to pull out this mentorship and talk about how she wanted to continue that mentorship into her MBA program, and really leverage Forte and continue to grow with Forte, which, so I really think making that connection with Forte and keeping it along through the process and really leveraging that connection was a key piece to her getting that fellowship in the end.
All right. So let me go ahead and jump in, and I'm going to try to go through this pretty quickly because I do want to make sure we have time for questions. So how we help you in terms of what we do is, and this is a lot of giant slide, which I'm not going to spend too much time on, but we basically help our clients in that phase one, build your profile and your strategy. So get to know what is great about you and what are your key strengths, and also strategy. So strategizing about scholarships, strategizing about, where might be a good fit for you. Then we work with people on phase two, which is actually writing, and let me be clear, we do not write anybody's essays, but, working with you to outline and help you, challenge you at each draft and say, that's not clear. Why don't you go back and, do more? So it's really challenging you to do your best work in that process. And then we do have, like I said, school-specific counselors who can help the reality checks on any of the applications that you have, which is helpful. And then we're there with you all the way in phase three, which we are right now in phase three with most of our clients post-submission, where they're doing interviews and actually getting great news. I just got a client, got an email today, got into NYU Stern, very excited about that. So all kinds of things like that, but we're with you basically from the moment you sign up to the moment you decide where to go through every step of the way. In terms of, if you're interested to know more about how Stratus works with us, this line here, this line about stratusadmissionscounseling.com consult, if you I'll leave that for a second. If you want to write that down, that's the best way, because then you can sort of request a consult to learn more about us and what we do. And then this I want to share, because this is something that, could be useful for any of you, especially early in the process. We are running a contest right now. At that, if you pick up that link, that I won't read it, but just sort of I'll leave it on there for a while, where we are giving away an application strategy package, which is really only phase one of those three phases, but it's basically helping you get your, what would be a good strategy for me, help me think about schools, help me think about my unique strengths, and maybe what would be some key themes in my application. So we are offering that. And so for those of you who stayed with us to the end, have a chance to win that, which definitely has a good value. But that, I think, I want to get to the questions. So let's I don't know, Melissa, if you're seeing questions or where we are on that.
We don't have any yet. I just wanted to add in real quickly, as you talked about the consult, those are free as well. So we offer 30-minute consults, and we can spend time talking about your unique story and talk a little bit about how we could help along the process. So just so that it's clear that that's free.
Yeah, that's free. And then this is just a chance to win I mean, we have this is a package people can purchase, but we are giving away a free package, so you can enter to win from that link.
All right.
While we're waiting, if we're still waiting, the one thing I think sometimes people might have a question about, how do you, and this is not such an easy answer, but, if I get a scholarship at one school and I really want it at another school, what can I do? And that comes up a lot. And I was on the receiving end of that at Keenan Flagler sometimes. And the advice that I would give to you to keep in mind, it's always good to have options, but this is not like your car shopping where you say, to Kellogg, well, Kellogg, I've been given a full ride at, Ross, so I expect you to match that. But I think you can share with a school, hey, I really like your school, and this decision is hard for me because I have X offer somewhere else. And if there's anything that you can do to help, and it's a subtle difference, but it's, MBA programs do not like people coming and demanding, coughing up money. And schools have only a certain amount of money, to offer each year. Certainly schools would like to have as much as possible because they like to use this as a way to help strengthen and build their class. But it's not something that, so, and once they give their money, once it's out there, you're not, it's gone. So that's where usually there is money for most of the schools. They allocate, and they're looking to give it in both round 1 and round 2. But certainly, in general, if scholarships are an important part of your strategy, I would say the earlier you apply, obviously, the more money has not been allocated yet. So as you go through, later and later in an application season, so if your strategy is, I want to make sure I get a scholarship, then I would not suggest that you wait until round 3 to start putting your applications in, because that's going to really limit the fact that there's already, a lot of the money has already been allocated to people. So that's another sort of tip. And while we're waiting, if there aren't any other questions, Melissa, do you have any that you would think that?
We've got one here, and then we've got a couple here. So one was, do recommendations have to come specifically from professors? And I'll start, and then Donna, please add in. Generally, for an MBA program, recommendations would come from people that you have worked with. So generally, or almost always, a program is looking for something from your direct manager or supervisor. And then often it can be someone who maybe you tangentially report to or have kind of a dotted line reporting relationship. Sometimes you could use a client. There's a number of different ways. For a MBA, unless you worked with a professor, so often people will maybe do an internship with a professor. That might be an example where you would use a professor, but it's MBA programs are generally looking for recommendations from a professional standpoint. Donna, you have anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I can't agree more. And I would say I do a whole webinar on recommenders, and so that's a whole world to itself. But these are words you want to try to avoid in recommendations if possible. Colleague, friend, peer, and professor. So none of these are as helpful as direct supervisor or senior, someone that you reported to in a senior role in an organization on a project or something like that. So hopefully that answers. I mean, again, you can't simplify. There's always an exception to the rule, but in general, you really want to be looking for your work experience and the people who knew you at work.
Yeah, and just one quick add, and then I'll go to the next one, is that it's more important to have someone that you work closely with and knows your work product than to have the CEO of your company if they don't know you. So close proximity of kind of working relationship as well. Donna, how about the number of programs that someone should apply to if they're trying to maximize their chances to get in and or a scholarship?
So I would say applying round 1 is useful, because if you need to, then you can always go to round 2. I'd say, to do, and it is much more complicated to apply to MBA programs than it is undergrad kind of thing. Mm-hmm. There's more involved. And I would say
There
that
is
my
no
clients
common app.
probably, yeah, like maybe 5 to 6 in a round, and that's a lot. That's a lot, but that's probably, doable if you were to start, especially for people, if they were to start like now. Of course, there's no applications yet. The applications don't go live until usually June or late June is kind of the time when a lot of them go live. And a lot of round 1 deadlines are in September and October. So when you think about that, that only gives you 2 months in some cases. But you can be doing a lot of the research on programs now and visiting schools now, so that if you were to do some of that pre-work and do your testing now, I think it is doable, and I've seen people be able to submit good applications to 5 or 6 schools in a round if they are doing some pre-work now in terms of visits and things, so that when the applications can, that's what I would say.
And I like that number 5 because it allows for at least one reach school, which is nice to have hey, if everything else, if I could go to one place, where could it go, even if my numbers might not support it? And it allows for there to be a good solid safety school, and then really have a good 2 to 3 targets in there to kind of help round out the portfolio schools that you're applying to. Well, and that's about it from questions.
Okay, so I know Lisa said she had some things she wanted to say right at the end, so we maybe can pass it back.
Okay, everyone. Thank you so much to Donna and Melissa for leading the session, and thanks to everyone for their participation today. If you have any comments or questions about today's topic, you may email the presenters, and I figured out how to do this. Let's just take a second. Click, copy, paste. There we go. If you would like to be more involved in CAPA's virtual training and webinar programs, we'd love to have you on our producer team. Please contact the Education Department at KKG for details. The benefits are excellent, including the opportunity to support CAPA's webinar program and a front row seat at a great presentation. As we close the webinar, a survey will open on your screen. You will be prompted to respond to a few evaluation questions. Please take a moment to share your thoughts on today's webinar. Your feedback will help us shape future webinar training events. And if you have any additional questions or comments whatsoever, please send an email to education@kkg.org. Thanks so much for everyone for attending. I hope you all have a wonderful evening.